Good evening, welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It's TJ, your host. We're in the Narcissist bag of tricks. I'm going to go over 3 examples of situations where these creatures give you some clues that you're dealing with a monster, and sometimes they even tell on themselves. As Sasha Sloan said, you just have to know how to listen. The first example comes from my long-term 11-year fake relationship that I didn't know was fake until several years into it. The situation was we had just moved in together. I had let this creature stay in my home until it found a new apartment. Little did I know that it had no intention of ever finding an apartment. It wanted to throw it all on, the love bombing, to make it so I would think, oh my goodness, this is it. You don't need to find an apartment. Stay here. Let's get a bigger place, which is what happened. And I thought it was all my idea. Regardless, we had just moved into this place, and I had been informed that this creature had a pre-existing engagement, which was a trip to New York City with its ex-partner, and they had a room together. Normally, this would be a no-brainer. If you have plans with an ex prior to your breakup, then you would simply cancel those plans, but apparently in this case, it was a business trip. The business this creature worked at with the ex still, which was another point of pain throughout the beginning parts. It was something they needed to do for their work, so I couldn't really stand in the way of that. They've got something they had before, and I'm not a part of it. If something happens, it probably will. If it does, what am I going to do about it? Big deal, because it was so new, I'd figured, well, it really didn't matter. But I still had an idea that something went on. Well, when the creature came back, I brought it up. So, what happened? Are you sure whatever didn't happen? I was given this line. It was,
I'm only going to tell you this once, and after I tell this to you, I don't want you to ever bring it up again.
well, if you hear those words or words similar to them, this is just a clue to tell you that this person's going to lie to you and doesn't want to have to defend themselves because they're no good at it and wants you just to believe it. So they're telling you for your benefit, but it's fake. Beware. And that story that it told was typical of the cluster B type creature, where it claimed that one night they had taken some party favor, and in the room the ex did all these things to it while it was asleep, and it didn't realize, and then it woke up and, oh, it's all over. Something like that, which was ridiculous. It probably said not to ever mention it again, meaning not to ever go to the other person and say, hey, how could you have done this on that trip? But I didn't dare. I didn't know what I was dealing with yet. That it was that kind of story where it was not to blame. The other person basically took advantage. I'd always thought there was something strange about that, never bring this up again, because I'd never heard anything like that discussed about anything else ever. But it turned out the lesson was learned not to believe such words, because I learned from other sources that that story was complete BS, and that the creature itself had initiated whatever happened. Great. Because that's not a normal way to deal with something. If you're telling someone something and it's uncomfortable, well, it should still be spoken. It shouldn't be something that you never have to talk about again. So that was a clue. Another red flag that I ignored. But then what could I do? The lease was signed. The next one comes in a situation where I was broken away from the long-term stuff and even found a little short-term creature in the meantime that flew in and flew out. I had met another person that I worked with that would come to my home and visit. I was discussing things with it once because I had become familiar with the online applications of dating where you can see people's locations. I just thought, wow, this stuff never existed before, and I was playing with it, thinking it was interesting, and I was talking to this creature, and this creature had mirrored my every move when I'd said at the beginning, like, hey, we can hang out together, but don't think I'm looking for any romance. This creature said, oh, I'm not looking for it either, which is mirroring. So I went ahead and told it about the things I've discovered, and I'd said, hey, I've been talking to some people online. It looks like what they do is they get a date with one person, but then they keep backups for other nights, and it seems kind of strange. And this creature said,
Oh, I used to do that. I used to keep backup.
well, beware of used to do things which are not compatible with what they're stating they want to do now with you, because if they did do these things such as, oh, I made love to 100 hookers on a vacation once on a cruise ship, and you're the lucky lady who wants to marry him, you may step back and say, wait a second, a guy who likes to make love to 100 ladies on a cruise ship must not be satisfied with one woman, and you'll get ridiculous excuses like,
Oh, that's the past, I don't do that anymore.
and the key here is the journey. It's perfectly believable that you might meet a person who used to be some loose hoa, and then today maybe they've changed their ways and they're more devoted and know what's important. But the problem is there has to be a journey between point A to point Z, which point A is the hooker out there with the 100 lady. The Z would be the one man with one partner forever, the rest of its life. They're two polar opposites. It is possible that maybe a person would go from one to the other. The problem is with these creatures, you can always check, is the journey. You need to ask them, really, you went from that to this? Tell me, how did that go? How did you reach Z from A? That's a big change. And you'd be waiting for a savory story full of details and depth of what happened and what caused them to make this change, each step and how they got there. With these creatures, you'll get something foolish like,
Oh, I just decided one day I didn't want to be with 100 women, and I want to be with one.
well, my question would be, oh, really, then what's to say that you're not going to feel that way again about wanting 100 ladies tomorrow? Because that's the way these creatures work, even though it's phony. It did admit to saying I kept backups. Well, if they said they kept backups, then you can pretty much guarantee that's the same mind frame they're in today. People don't just automatically switch from an A to a Z because, oh, I met you, I'm in love with you, I'm not like the way I was yesterday, and think, that's not realistic. Because again, it's possible for people to make drastic changes in their life, but it's not possible for them to do it overnight like these creatures will have you believe.
Monday I was a hooker. Tuesday I'm a devout Christian and want one wife forever.
It's just not real. So look out for that kind of talk. And don't try to talk them out of it because they'll just keep on going and saying how wrong you are. And the punchline with this creature is, it wasn't long before I found out that, sure enough, it was still engaging in the backup game. It was pretending to be devoted to me, even though I wasn't committing to anything, and yet at the same time was pursuing others which I met later. Isn't that beautiful? And the third example here is the worst, which was another example of the creature that I told I wasn't really interested in seriousness. In the beginning, after I thought the person was safe, I went ahead and laid it all out and said, look, here's where I am today in this world, and here's how I got there. I went through some stories, and I noticed when I said the one thing about the partner doing something horrible, I was told,
Oh, I've had that done too.
Mirroring. And I said, oh, look, this person cheated and lied and did these terrible things, pretended like I was paranoid for questioning it.
Oh, I know how that is.
The person said, and mirrored. So I felt, okay, well, this is someone I can tell it to. It knows my position. It knows I'm not looking for a wedding ring. And it knows I'm bitter at the horrific people out there in this world. So I would lay in and say, here's another thing. And just basically vent. I was thinking this person was understanding my venting because it said it went through all of it itself. And I was, at one point, recalling a situation with the long-term creature, abandoned, me and the two children. I was telling the story of the situation that was going on. Thinking, again, I was speaking to a like-minded person. The situation was, I was telling that I had noticed strange little things that you could see in an online list somewhere of how to tell if your partner's cheating, which were a series of particular events like new cologne, being gone all the time, making plans that I'm not a part of, spending an awful lot of time with one particular person in all of its spare time. Just various things like that. So naturally, I'd think, well, something's going on with that person. It's obvious. I'd see the car there, parked when it should be at home. Things like that. And I was telling this creature all this, thinking it was going to understand and maybe have its own story to say, oh, mine did this, but it didn't. But what happened was I got to a point where I was disclosing contents of the conversation. So I said something like, you know what that creature had the nerve to say? It said, if you're going to accuse me of being with so-and-so, well then I might as well be with so-and-so. When I said that, I was expecting the other person to say, oh, that is so horrible. Can you believe they say that stuff? But guess what happened instead? Instead, the creature said,
Well, hell yes. If you're going to accuse someone of doing something, they might as well do it. That's right.
that was a big red flag because that tells its philosophy, which I was unaware of, and it was disguising with a fake character of perfection and innocence. But that's kind of frightening to think. There it was. I heard it right there. It thinks the same way as the previous creature actually defended it. And I just passed it off thinking, oh, it's just a dumb kid. And then later got reeled in further and thought back to these red flags, but was confused with all the love bombing and all the idealization. It made it all blurry and difficult to comprehend. Only after being away from it for quite a while did it finally make sense to think, if I stay in that situation, I'll be dead or in the loony bin. So if you... And the lesson here was learned, eventually, that true to form, this creature was pretty much a carbon copy of the previous one that I was talking about. And oh, they hate that. If you dare bring up something like you're acting just like my ex did, they will act so offended. But my thing is, look, if it looks like a duck, it's a duck. You lied, cheated, and stole, it lied, cheated, and stole. What's the difference? If I said, oh, you know my ex who stole from me, I'm gonna get it, you'd be saying, which one? Because they both lied, cheated, and stole. But these people are retarded. Retarded. So if you recognize any of these types of occurrences with a creature you're involved with, it doesn't necessarily mean they're anything, it just means be very careful, because they could be a creature, which could be any one of those cluster bees.
It's me, the Narcopath of your dreams and your wishes.
I'm here once again in my prison, giving you more confessions. Thanks to my host. I've been given the suggestion to discuss this confession, which I'd rather not do. Please, can we do another one? Can't we talk about baseball?
I think it's best that we just stick with the plan.
Fine. You know, when we first met, you thought you really connected to somebody great because I was interested in everything. Even if you expressed despair, I would be quick to say, what's wrong? What's wrong? Why did I do that? Is it because I'm a nice person and care about your general well-being and consider you a person? No, it's not. It's for me to collect in my little bag of tricks, says TJ, that's what he calls it.
I just call it smarts. I collect your insecurities. Why? Because they come in handy. Because I know time's gonna run out eventually for me.
I'm fake. I'm not a real person. I pretend to be just like you, and obviously I'm not. So I know it's inevitable. I'm gonna figure this out. So I prepare long in advance, as early as the first date. If I see you act like you have discomfort about anything, I'll quickly ask. See, to you, that masquerades that I care. That makes you think I'm a great person. I just keep it up. What you don't know is that when you're doing these things, for example, that time that you were about to give your speech, I heard you talking and you were worried that maybe your waist looks a little bit too big and you were looking at it and tucking it in. Of course, I said, oh honey, don't be silly, your waist is perfect, I love it. But I kept that in mind. If you think back, do you recall, several months later, when you started expressing interest in a certain individual that you thought that I was having an affair with, and I assured you I wasn't, it may begin to start making sense for you now. Do you recall? You wanted to talk to him? I made sure to tell you that.
I don't think you want to talk to him. He's not a nice guy. I don't like him. In fact, he made fun of me.
I treated this very dramatically. I couldn't have you talking to him. I knew what your insecurity was from long ago, so when you were about to go meet with him to try to set the record straight about what I had to do with anything, because you did find his phone number in my phone, even though I told you I didn't know it, I was sure to tell you.
I don't think you want to talk with him. He's not a nice person. He saw your speech and he said you looked like a pig after giving your speech. Oh, no, I told him I said you look fine, but he insisted you look like a pig. I really shouldn't tell you this. Never mind.
I said that, and that got you. You see, I know just how to do that with people, as if you'd ever go up to someone like him, a stranger, and ask him, did you say that I look like a pig? Because that would just expose you, and your insecurities right there, and you try to keep them secret. But I know this. That's exactly how I work. So guess what it did? It got you to not talk to him, and I was able to get away with my affair with him for another 6 months. See? I'm smarter than you. You're a Goya, a useless eater. I am the divine queen of the world. One day you'll see. It's your loss that we're not together. You should have thought about that before you chose to use your brain and think.
Boogie with the suitcase. You're living in a disco. Forget about the rat craze. Let's do a milkshake, Activate. New York, London, Paris, Munich. Everybody talk about pop music. Talk about pop music. Talk about pop music. Pop music. Pop music. Singing subway. Show in the shoe shine. Makes me a Molotov. I'm on the headline. I wanna be a dance with it. Don't be a rock singer. Anybody know what's ready? Talk about pop music. Hit it! Now you know what to say. Everybody talk about pop music. Wherever you are, dance on the street, anything you like, do it in the car. Dance in the supermarket, dig it in the fast lane. Listen to the countdown, they're playing a song again. I can't get you back, I wanna hold you back. Pop music, talk about pop music, talk about pop music. New York, London, Paris, Munich, everybody talk about pop music. Talk about pop music. Talk about pop music. Pop music. Pop music. Do you read me? Loud and clear.